guys, we're going to jump right into hospital autopsies. And I will tell you that, and you've heard me say this before, and I'm sure y'all are sick of me saying this, but if you haven't really done the work in the book for hospital autopsies, and this chapter just in general, like I said before, it's a really good idea to go ahead and do the information in the workbook, especially for hospital autopsies, because there's a lot of information in here. So you're given a whole page. I'm on page 127 of what a hospital autopsy is, and they're getting you ready for this formula that we have on the next page. So let's talk for a minute about what a hospital autopsy is, which we've gotten a definition before, but it's a postmortem exam that is ordinarily performed in a hospital facility on the body of an inpatient who died during hospitalization. In contrast, a hospital autopsy, we're missing the word inpatient, is a postmortem examination of a body of a person who at some time has been a hospital patient. And you know what? I'm going to highlight that, right? So who has at some time been a hospital patient? Former inpatients may include emergency patients, outpatients, and home care. Up to this point, all of our rates have only considered inpatient. This rate that we're going to work on page 128 includes everyone. So that's going to be a little more difficult for you to wrap your mind around because we've not included outpatients yet, but for this one rate, we're going to start working with outpatient information. Then you get some bullet points about when determining what autopsies to include in the rate, the following guidelines apply. So hospital autopsies are usually performed by the healthcare facility pathologist, or we call them the HP, right? The hospital pathologist. However, small hospitals do not always have an HP on staff, so the responsibility may be delegated to another physician. We understand that. We know that from our inpatient definition. So the next bullet says, normally, hospital autopsies are performed in hospitals. However, small hospitals or a specialty hospital may not have deaths and may not be equipped, and so we're going to send those out to another designated place, but they still belong to us because we're going to use our hospital pathologist to perform the autopsy. And that's really kind of what it gets down to is, are we using our guy, look at me, I can't get that straight. Are we using our guy to do the hospital autopsy so we can count it? Your third bullet says, as a general rule, hospital autopsies are performed on inpatients who died, right? A hospital inpatient autopsy, what we've been dealing with so far. However, because of the educational value, we're going to look into counting emergency services, outpatients, home health care, or hospice. And so here's a breakdown of what those types of patients are, and you'll remember that from 110 when we talked about different patient classifications. So as usual, fetal autopsies are not included because the fetus isn't considered a patient, right? So that's the same as DOAs, right? So newborn DOAs. And then you've got the essential components for an autopsy and why we're going to count it. So the first bullet says the autopsy must be performed by a staff pathologist, which again we know we're going to call the HP, or a designated physician. There must be consent. The autopsy report must be filed in the patient's health record, and then we're going to keep tissue specimens in our lab. And so once you've read through all of page 127, you're going to get over here to some examples. See if I can do a better job about getting that. There we go. You're going to get some examples of what hospital autopsy cases include. So a patient dies in the hospital and is autopsied by the HP in the local morgue. Now the reason we can count them is because of this guy right here, because our hospital pathologist is taking care of it. A patient dies in the hospital and one of the hospital's physicians is designated to perform the autopsy on behalf of the staff pathologist. And that's why right there, because they've been designated to do so. The next bullet says a former patient is pronounced dead on arrival in the hospital's ED and the staff pathologist performs the autopsy. So why does that count? Because it's a former patient. So that's why we're counting that guy, and our staff pathologist is performing the autopsy, so we can count them. By far, this is the most confusing rate that you will have in this class, the adjusted hospital autopsy rate. The formula doesn't do a great job of explaining what patient types go into the formula. So I have this written down, and I suggest that you do this on whatever formula sheet you're using. So total hospital autopsies, what they mean by that, they want all of your inpatient autopsies and all of your outpatient autopsies added together, multiplied by 100. And the formula says total deaths of hospital patients whose bodies are available for autopsy. It doesn't give you a great explanation, so I want you to write down what I have here. So you've got all the inpatient deaths, all the outpatient deaths. You're going to add those together, and then you're going to subtract out any bodies that have been removed by the medical examiner or coroner. And so we're going to work through a couple of problems here in just a minute, so you can hopefully see what I'm talking about. You get a little bit of an explanation of what does bodies that are available for autopsy mean, and you can read through these two bullets and find out when a patient that applies to a patient or doesn't apply to a patient. So let's just go ahead and jump into 7.6. So I've got it written out for you because I think 7.6 is unnecessarily difficult, if I can say that about your textbook. I think they make this word problem a little more difficult than they need to be. So what we've got here is a word problem that says during the last quarter, community hospital had 22 inpatient deaths, 7 of whom were autopsied. 2 of the 22 were coroner's cases, but 1 was autopsied by the HP, which is included in the 7. In addition, the following bodies were brought to the hospital for autopsy: 2 former inpatients who died in the ER, 1 former inpatient who died in a skilled nursing facility, 2 former inpatients who died at home, 1 patient who died during a round of outpatient chemo. What is the adjusted rate? And they want you to round it to 2 decimal places. So first off, you got to pull the relevant information out of this formula for it to even make sense. And I hope you just didn't skip it because you didn't understand it. So after this, if you did skip it, I want you to go back and try it, even though you've got the answer right here. But you can see exactly how I've pulled this out, and it is a little difficult. So first thing that I went through the problem and pulled out all the deaths: 22 inpatient, 2 ER, 1 skilled nursing, 2 home health, 1 outpatient, that's the chemo. Then went and got the autopsies, which they told us 7 inpatient, 2 ER, 1 SNF, 2 home, 1 outpatient, for a total of 13 autopsies. So then it's time to set it up, right? And so we're going to set it up based on what I have on page 128. So we know we need the total number of hospital autopsies, which is inpatient plus outpatient. That's my list right here, right? So I've got all these inpatients, and the rest of these are outpatients. So we've got 13 autopsies multiplied by 100 over inpatient plus outpatient deaths minus coroner cases. So our problem told us, here are our total number of deaths. We've got 28, and we had 2 bodies removed by the coroner, but because the coroner asked our guy to do one of the autopsies, we can count him. So really only 1 body was unavailable for autopsy at 48.15. And I think that's where it gets unnecessarily difficult in that word problem. There's a lot of twists and turns. So I don't necessarily like 7.6, so I'm going to flip the page. And I'm going to skip over to 7.8 on the adjusted rate while we're talking about it, so we can look at it outside of a word problem in a table, which is going to be much more like what you're used to. So using the information in the table below, it tells you to calculate the gross death, gross autopsy, and the adjusted, but we're only going to work on the adjusted right now, and we'll come back and do the others. So with the adjusted rate, remember, we're following the formula over here. Inpatient plus outpatient autopsies multiplied by 100. And see, I'm getting the information right here. Over, you need your total number of deaths. So you've got 362 adult and children, 4 newborn, and then 12 outpatients. You can't forget the 12 outpatient. Inpatient plus outpatient minus medical examiner or coroner. Your table does a great job of telling you there were 6 bodies that were removed, unavailable for autopsy. So minus 6. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that's the most frequently missed portion of this problem. Students forget about that. So that's why I said if you will, on your formula sheets now, write this down. At least you get a fighting chance on how to calculate this formula. And you should get 29.30. And because we're still talking about the adjusted rate, I'm going to zip on over to 7.92 so we can have another practice round with the adjusted rate before we move on. So in this particular table, using the information in the table below, calculate the adjusted rate and round to 2 decimal places. So you've got your deaths, inpatient and outpatient, autopsies, inpatient, outpatient, and your number of coroner's cases. And so at this point, it's just setting it up. So we know on the top portion of the formula, we need inpatient and outpatient autopsies multiplied by 100. And I just combined emergency and home health into outpatient. On the bottom, we need the total number of deaths. So 12 inpatient, 3 outpatient, subtract the 2 coroners for 46.15. So again, if you were kind of skipping over the book, it's going to be important for you to make sure that you're going back through and working these adjusted rates. I'll give you some on your homework, but these are really good problems that come out of the book, and I don't always say that. Sometimes your book does a good job and sometimes it's lacking. If we're skipping back over to 7.8 and just taking a look, I just wrote gross death rate down so you can check yourself. Gross autopsy, we know from the beginning of the chapter, 97 autopsies, because we're back to inpatient now, multiplied by 100, over the total number of inpatient deaths, so that's adult children and newborn. And then we're going to subtract, we're up here, 362 plus 4 for 26.50. And then our net autopsy rate, remember, so let's go back and look at the net. So the net is total autopsies over deaths minus coroner's cases. So 97 multiplied by 100 over that same 362 plus 4, because those are our inpatient deaths, minus 6 coroner's cases for 26.94. Remember, those net rates look better because we're subtracting out or not having credit for something that we didn't have. All right, so that kind of gets us through the adjusted and the hospital autopsies, which was worth its own individual video. So I'm going to pick back up in the next video on page 132.